Okay, it's 7:02 p.m. on Monday, May 9th. This is a meeting of the Wellfleet Affordable Housing Trust. Meeting's being conducted virtually in accordance with the open meeting law. Meeting is being recorded by the town. Anyone else desiring to record the meeting may do so, as long as they inform the chair and don't disrupt the conduct of the meeting. Do we have any announcements or public comments, since we actually have a couple members of the public present?
I can announce that the summer event, which was scheduled for August 7th, has been moved to August 8th. So the Housing Angels concert, benefit concert at Watt will be on Monday evening, August 8th. I don't recall the time. I think 5 o'clock.
Okay. Anything else?
Harry?
Yes.
This may be things that you might be thinking of saying, but I'm not sure everybody knows that apparently the town got a $2.7 million grant for the wastewater treatment plant at 95 Lawrence Road under the Forward program under ARPA funding.
Wow, I did not know that, actually.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan,
Yeah.
Gary and I were in a meeting with him and he announced it so casually. It was like, what? And then also the Mass Housing Partnership has named the town of Wellfleet as a housing hero for their annual meeting coming up because of the robust team we have put together.
Well,
and the support of our town.
That's excellent news.
Yeah.
Any other public comment or housing related news? Okay. Well, let's go right to Maurice's campground. I put this on. I put on the agenda the question of providing funds for due diligence for the purchase of Maurice's campground. I have not had any requests at this point and have not heard any further communication, but it seems to me that we are the only solvent source of funding. Here comes Jim. I'll wait till Jim pops in and start this over again. Okay, so now we have all trustees present on Maurice's campground. I put on the agenda an item for considering possible funding of due diligence expenses for Maurice's campground, because I'm not aware of any other ready source of funds that the town has for these expenses. But having said that, I haven't received anything from Ryan or anybody else in terms of what those expenses might be. So I'm not willing, well, let's see, I am concerned that if we delay acting on this, we will run afoul of some of the timing commitments in that purchase and sale agreement, in particular to get the financials reviewed by a competent financial professional. So I don't have any specific amount in mind. And so I had given some thought to an authorizing vote, authorizing some not to exceed amount to be spent, to authorize the treasurer to spend it with the approval of either the chair or the vice chair, so that they'll have at least some control over the expenditure. Not that I distrust our treasurer in any way, but I think having two eyes on any expenditure is probably a wise thing. So with that in mind, I have, let me share my screen. And what I had in mind was something along these lines. I hope you can see see that. So I'd open this up for discussion in terms of what people think we should do, given the lack of any real detailed information on this issue, and also the timeliness of the time sensitivity of the issue.
I think that if we're going to have a CPA look at the information we've gotten, and I'm not exactly sure that we're going to end up doing that just based on how the information has come in, but let's just say we go along with that plan. And we know we're the ones that have to put the money out. We might as well just go through these motions and have it ready to go so that it's not more cumbersome than it needs to be.
Right. I don't really relish the thought of having to call a meeting on 48 hours notice to get something done in a hurry, because people aren't always available. And when you rush, things go wrong. And for all those reasons, it's also possible that there may be some other due diligence expenses that we have. For example, we may have to talk with somebody about strategizing to deal with the septic issue, for example, or something like that. So I don't know what an amount might be. I was sort of kicking around $20,000 without having anything specific in mind. But, what's your pleasure?
Harry, I was thinking 25,000. We had a brief meeting with Laura Schufelt the other day, and she's certainly looking at the town's request for due diligence funds. It complicates it. She said it complicated it, that the fact that the town was going to run the campground for 6 years, so she had to figure out what would make sense. So I'm not sure we're going to get as much as we had kind of hoped for from them. And we might need more than this, but I think for now, this will be a good start.
We can always come back. I hope we can't spend much more than this in a month.
Right.
Gary?
Yes, Gary.
I had a long conversation this afternoon with Stuart Saganor, who is the director of the statewide CPA coalition, who is very, very knowledgeable about CPA and bonding and land acquisition. And he gave me a lot of information that was somewhat different than what our original understanding was. So, but one of the things he said was that you could do an appraisal that all the land is not valued the same.
Right.
And so, for instance, if we were talking about a 5 acre set aside for housing, that could have a much greater value than just 20% of the available land, and therefore would allow us to fund more with CPA, but it would require an in-depth appraisal. And we know how much that would cost, but I'm wondering if we have to have an appraisal and perhaps a survey, if 25 is enough. Or is 25 enough for now, I guess?
I think, typically I would expect that we will meet sometime in June and sometime in July, so that I'm really only thinking of what we might need in the next 5 weeks or so. Mike?
Yeah, I was just going to say that's to potentially fund part of the acquisition. Is that correct, Gary? Is that what the?
Yes.
So I think that we wouldn't necessarily have to go there quite yet, as far as just this due diligence money that we're putting up, because this is really just to cover our basis for that purchase and sale requirements, right? Is that right, Harry? I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, that's the scope of the agenda item. I really wasn't planning on doing financial planning for the purchase, since I felt that it was going to be left with the select board's working group. Right now, I'm just trying to address the ability to provide some funding if there are some costs associated with that process.
I think that the 25,000 is probably good. Maybe we want to put it at 30,000 just in case, but you know, I've gotten the financials, and I can't imagine it's going to be that expensive for a CPA to go through and sort of verify what seems to be pretty clear to me about the profitability of the rentals and the campground. But
Yeah.
so I think 25 is probably going to do it, but I don't know if it makes sense. What are the other items that we might be paying for? We're not surveying.
Well,
Land courted.
we're not going to survey it, but we may want to incur some expense for an expert to help us strategize on the septic system. Maybe it'll be town council. I don't know.
Right.
You know, I just don't
25.
know.
25 is probably adequate.
I'm comfortable with
It's
that.
it certainly will get us through the next 5 weeks, which
Yeah.
is what my concern is. Any other thoughts? Yeah,
Can I
Sharon?
just, so I know this is like not, it's not necessarily due diligence, but it was, and to stop me if this is off topic, but the communications group was thinking that it might be a good idea to prepare some postcards that could be put around town to just kind of remind people that this is happening and that they can go to the housing website for information. All the most up-to-date information that we have will be posted there, that kind of thing. I don't know if that's, I mean, I know that's small potatoes expense, but I don't know if that's something that the trust would be willing to pay for.
I suspect we might be. I didn't think of it when I prepared this agenda item. I was specific about due diligence expense.
Yeah, okay.
And again, you know, we'll be revisiting this monthly until it's done.
Mhm.
So, any other thoughts, comments, Elaine?
Have we had a title review?
We have not.
Okay.
That's something that town council can do. And it's something that most any competent real estate attorney can do. And I think the only place where there would be any mystery would be the roughly half acre or acre piece that was purchased from Al Rich. And looks like a good portion of that is wetland anyway.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, the rest is land courted.
Yeah, the rest is land courted, and they're really, you still have to go through a process, but there really isn't much in the way of a mystery there.
I mean, the other thing Laura mentioned is not an in-depth survey, but at least showing all the bounds, a site plan.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Gary.
Laura was going to get an engineering proposal that included various things that we had to look at, and but she did mention endangered species.
Yep.
That's one of the things that we would have to get validated. Hazardous materials.
Well, that's a big site. To do a full hazardous material study on that site, 25 grand is not going to do it. It could cost 4 times that without a problem. And it's rarely done unless you know there's a problem.
Yeah,
So
I don't think that's typically.
Yeah, but again, I'm just trying to avoid a crisis in the next month until we have a handle on what's going on.
For the sake of moving this along, I have no problem with accepting the 25,000, and I'd be happy to make the motion if you'd like, Harry.
Okay, well, we'll put your name right in here. Yeah, and does somebody want to second it?
Second.
Second,
Okay. Okay, so we'll do a roll call vote. Let's see, Jim? I know you're out there somewhere. I'll come back
Dude,
to
sorry,
you.
aye.
Okay. Mike,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Kathleen,
aye.
Sharon,
I,
Elaine,
Aye.
chair votes aye. That's 7 in favor, none opposed. And, okay, so I will, okay, so that takes care of that. Multifamily zoning bylaw, yep,
Excuse me, Harry,
Yeah,
before
go
we
ahead.
leave,
yep,
Maurice Campan, can we put it on the agenda for next week or next meeting and
yeah,
invite Stuart Saganor, and he can give us some information about
mhm,
how other towns have handled this.
mhm. How do you spell his last name, Gary?
Saginor.
Okay. Okay.
Thank
Okay. Multifamily zoning bylaw amendments. There were a couple of things floating around on that. Let me stop sharing for the moment anyway, so we can see each other.
Harry, did you mean to skip over 95 Lawrence? Or do I have an old agenda?
I don't have it on this agenda. Did it get put on?
Oh, yeah, Harry, I put it on the revised agenda.
Oh, okay. I missed it. I'm sorry.
But
So-
I was hoping that we would have heard back from POA CDP about their thoughts about it,
Mhm.
which I haven't. And then they had not known about the $2.7 million grant for wastewater, I think with Rebecca away. So I sent them the email today and they were very excited that that could potentially affect what they might be looking for. So that's all.
Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about in connection with that, Gary?
No, I just
Okay.
saw it on the agenda.
Okay. Yeah, I had tried to conform my paper copy with what was posted, but obviously I missed that. So multifamily zoning. Eastham adopted 2 proposals. I have copies of those. You know, I guess I'm not sure what we want to talk about on this, although I did see Jan Morrissey among the participants. Jan, did you have anything you wanted to say?
Harry, do you want me to speak to this?
I'll give the broad outline and maybe you speak to that. So in the housing partnership, we have had a discussion about whether or not broadening multifamily zoning to other districts and perhaps changing the nature of multifamily zoning bylaw will produce significant number of affordable units. And Jan is the representative from the ZBA on the partnership, and she has kindly taken the lead on both looking at what we have, looking at what other towns are doing, and trying to answer that question. So I think that's the discussion, Harry.
Okay.
Is it worth doing? And will it
Okay.
have an effect?
Yep. Hey, Jan?
Okay, do you want me to briefly describe what we do have?
Please.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So right now, multifamily dwellings, which are defined as 2 or more units, they're permitted in the central district by a special permit. And there's certain criteria that goes along with that as far as intensity of use. The first unit has to be, there has to be a minimum land area equal to the lot requirements of the district. And then each additional unit would require 8,000 square feet. Additionally, there's also something called an affordable, flexible residential design bylaw that was passed by town meeting in 2018. And that is basically a cluster bylaw that gives bonus units to the developer if he or she includes affordable units, and those affordable units can either be single or two family. The question is it worth amending our bylaws or creating something new to allow two-family dwellings or three in other districts or under different criteria in the commercial zone? I don't have those answers. I did find Eastham's bylaw, though, to include something kind of important for anything we do draft. They require a covenant with the town that's recorded at the Barnstable County Registry of Deeds that says that a two-family dwelling or something, there's also, you can convert motels and cottage colonies, that it will be either owner occupied or rented or leased at least for 12 months, which I thought was an interesting thing to include. I don't know how that works legally, Harry, a covenant like that.
Well, I do have the text, so I can share that if that's helpful.
Seems like something that would be more specific. I mean, maybe it should have been in the ADU bylaw. It might have been a little more.
Yeah. The problem with these covenants, and
It's on the second page, I think.
on the second page, yeah, here we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem with them is enforceability is always a problem. And typically the way you enforce them is you go to Superior Court and sue for an injunction. So by the time you address one of these, it's the same problem that happens in those subdivisions with protective covenants where somebody parks a mobile home in their yard, even though it says you can't, or the boat is 22 feet and the limit's 18 feet. Doing something about it can be hard.
Okay.
But
it sounds great.
but not having the requirement in there means, people can do whatever they want. And if it's, if you want to encourage year-round housing, this at least is a step you can take.
And this isn't multifamily, but I noticed that Eastham also passed a zoning bylaw for inclusionary, an inclusionary bylaw for any development with 5 or more dwellings, which is something else. I don't know if that's worth it at this point in Wellfleet, but I'm thinking that if the housing partnership and the housing authority and the housing trust thinks that maybe it is worth looking into some additional zoning bylaw changes, that there should be a working group, to talk this out and see if it's viable.
Yeah, I kind of hate to bring bylaw, zoning bylaw amendments before town meeting without being able to say, hey, we looked and there were 15 properties that could take advantage of this, and maybe we could get half a dozen affordable units out of it, so it's a good thing. Right. As opposed to, we think it's a good idea, but we don't know how it's going to work. And at this point, the town wouldn't be able to act on it. I don't see it in the annual town meeting warrant. And so it would be this fall or next spring before we could do anything about it anyway. So I think it's worth working on. I think advocating a specific draft right now is probably a little premature.
Harry, 2 things. Yes. It was the intention of the partnership. We were looking at the 2023 town meeting. So it would take some while to pull this together. But the second question we have, and I don't know the answer to this, is if we were to implement multi-family zoning in the district that contain Maurice's campgrounds, would it provide us with the ability to do much more flexible, again, for lack of a better name, workforce housing?
It probably would. I would guess that any housing project there is going to be a 40B and hopefully a friendly 40B. So we're going to be looking for lots of zoning relief anyway. I think that's zoned commercially, but it's the central district, I believe, where the apartments are special permit. Is that right?
Off the top of my head, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't believe where Maurice's is in the central district,
No, it's not.
the commercial district, excuse me.
Okay. You could very well be correct. I haven't looked in a long time.
Anyway, is it worth, if it's not worth pursuing, you and Kathleen are much closer to this.
Right.
So if you think it's not fruitful, we don't have any problem with not pursuing it, but
Well, I guess my suggestion would be somebody should survey the parcels that might benefit from this and find out whether there are any. I think there probably are about 24 parcels in town that are 10 acres or more. And some of those are already commercially developed. Some of them are wetlands. So there are a few possibly.
You're talking about inclusionary zoning?
Yeah.
right, I'm actually talking about multifamily zoning.
Is your hand still up, Mike, or is that
Yeah,
just an artifact? Go ahead.
Yeah, so I think this is worth pursuing, definitely in my mind. The one thing that would make me apprehensive is the ability to sell units and potentially just turn them into, condos that are just more seasonal, short-term rental condos. I don't know how, like with the ADU bylaw, there's a restriction on it to be in compliance with the ADU bylaw. It's connected to that piece of land. It can't be sold off as a separate thing. So there's some sort of leverage. I just think when you go into multifamily, and if there's not some kind of, restriction on the deed in order to do that, you're going to wind up with just a bunch of condominiums that sort of like over time just become, they're owned, but just sort of become short-term rentals and don't really address the problem. So I think that's like the issue that I see looking in it. But I also think like it's kind of crazy that our commercial district isn't zoned for multifamily units.
It is. The commercial
It
is. It's by
All
special permit.
commercial? Okay, all commercial is multifamily? With
Commercial
special
is
permit?
allowed by special permit.
Okay, I thought it was just a central district.
No, it's not allowed in the central district at all. Though whatever's there is
Just
grandfathered.
overlay. Okay, in the overlay district, that's all just grandfathered.
It's only commercial.
Okay, there's not much room for more multifamily down there, but except for some of the stuff that's already there in condos, but I don't know. I think the year-round element is a difficult thing to achieve when making multifamily zoning.
Is there a difference between a 2 or 3 unit condominium and the multifamily? What would be the potential differences? I'm not sure.
I don't know if Kathleen's got a different thought, but to me, the ownership issue is separate from the occupancy issue. And that, a condo that's restricted to year-round use is really no different than an apartment building that's restricted to year-round use. It's really the use you care about, not how you manage to slice up the ownership pie.
So I have
Kathleen.
2 things to say. One is Gauthier's property is listed as inns. So it's not residential, commercial, it's inns. So likely because there's so much lodging there. The other thing is my feeling, and we've talked about this before, look at the buy down program, which, by all purposes is really very successful in that we keep making it happen. We get 1 or 2 affordable homes out of it. If changing our zoning is not a tremendous cost and burden to us, even if we got 1 more affordable home, isn't it worth doing?
Probably.
Kathleen, can you define what inns means?
I don't have that in front of me. I'm sorry. All I have is on the field card. Typically it'll say like single family, multifamily, commercial. I'm sure we can find it on the assessors.
Do you want me to grab my zoning book and give you the definition?
Is
Is
that what
that,
you want, Gary?
is that INNS?
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
Inns
Yeah.
and lodgings?
Lodging
Yes.
houses.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I agree with Kathleen. I think especially inclusionary zoning, which is something we took to the planning board 15 years ago, and they massaged it into a bylaw we have that's never been used.
Mhm.
And we've lost homes at like Sam Hollow. We lost homes at that development off of Cahoon Hollow that now has the house for sale in it. It could even help with Maurice's and the other couple of big properties that are available. We could get 1 or 2 affordable homes ownership opportunities, which are so hard to get with especially inclusionary zoning. But I know some towns have a duplex bylaw instead of a multifamily bylaw too, which is just 2
Mhm.
instead of 3. So
Jan.
I'm not advocating for or against doing it. I'm a gatherer of information, but if we're going to proceed with looking at multifamily, single, 2-family, 3-family, whatever, and maybe inclusionary, there really should be a working group. I mean, that's how the ADU bylaw got done. There was a working
Yep.
group, and they went out and talked to a lot of experts, and you were one of them, Harry, and Bruce Behrens, and there was somebody involved with zoning,
Mhm.
and that's how it got done. So that's
Yeah.
how I think it should proceed from here, if it's worth doing.
I agree with you. And I guess in terms of where the responsibility for shepherding a project like this should fall, given how we've divided up the housing pie between the housing authority, the local housing partnership, and the trust, I just wonder how much of it belongs with us.
Probably the authority, right? The housing authority.
I think the local housing partnership is primarily, outreach and advocacy.
Well,
But not that I want to shirk responsibility for this. I just don't want to encroach on a project that another board's working on.
Harry, I think, I don't want to speak for the whole board, but I think as for myself, we can take the responsibility of taking the lead on it if you think it's fruitful, and maybe you or someone else knowledgeable from the trust would be willing to work on a ad hoc basis for a couple of months, and let's see if we can put it together.
Sure. Jan?
One question directed to you, Harry. Under Massachusetts statutes, how is a working group considered? I mean, if a subcommittee technically has to keep minutes, and I assume it would have to be Zoom meetings, how does a working group work?
Well, it depends, on the administrative side of government, the town administrator can get together a group to help him or her do some project. And that's not an open meeting law issue at all. On the other hand, we're talking about a project that arguably falls within the responsibility, the official responsibility of some of these boards and committees. And it's hard to see how you can do that without having to comply with the open meeting law.
I just wanted to make sure the right way to do it if we do
Yeah.
it. Thank you.
So, one way to do this might be to have a subcommittee of the local housing partnership do it, in which some people who like me, who are not on that committee, can also participate.
I was just going to say, Harry, if we don't have a majority of any organization, does that affect the open meeting requirement?
To appoint it, right?
I'm not sure. I think if you start discussing business that's going to end up in front of the committee, you end up as being, part of the serial deliberation kind of rule. So you still end up with a problem. So I'm just not sure.
Okay. How about this, Harry? Would this be acceptable? What if a working group of the local housing partnership, being Jan and I, with participation from the trust being you, were to meet to discuss it? Would we be in violation of any?
I don't think so.
All right, why don't we start there and then
Mhm.
kind of come to some conclusion about both
Okay.
whether it's worth pursuing. Jan, is that acceptable to you?
Sure.
Sure, I'll set something up then.
Yeah, and I think also the whole cottage colony motel conversion issue is another fruitful area that probably ought to be part of that discussion.
And didn't Ryan have something he was going to put forward? How do we bring
He-
Ryan in on this? And
He did draft a cottage colony motel conversion bylaw, and he did also have another one for building affordable restricted housing on otherwise unbuildable lots,
Right.
typically due to dimensional limitations. So, if he has the bandwidth to participate, I'd invite him.
I'll set that up.
Okay. The meat of
Can I
tonight's,
just
sure.
that?
Yep.
I'm sorry. So in in working on the ADU bylaw, there was it's always a question of whose responsibility it is, and of course the planning board feels that it's their responsibility. So the question would be, is it before you do anything, or maybe you collect some information, but you have to go to the planning board, and if they say, no, we've thought about this and we're not going to do it, then maybe you think about moving forward. But it may be that they'll say, oh yeah, okay, we'll work on that.
right.
Michael?
Yeah, that I was just gonna, in that same sense of the word, it is the only other group that can bring something to town meeting is either the select board or a citizen petition. So if the planning board with the ADU bylaw did not want to act on it, the select board wound up sponsoring that bylaw as their bylaw. And it was a little confusing because it was a petitioned bylaw too because of the deadline. So, but I definitely recommend bringing it to the planning board first. I don't think it's totally necessary. If there's a group that wants to write a bylaw and bring it to the planning board, whatever, but.
I totally support what Sharon said, but I was thinking, Sharon, is that we'd try to define it a little bit more and then bring it to the planning board and see if there was interest on that, and we can make some determination at that time.
Right.
Yep.
It's worth pursuing.
Yep.
Okay, can we leave that in your hands, Gary, for the moment?
Will do.
Okay. Town meeting warrant.
I'm going to sign out. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank
Have
you,
a good
Jan.
evening, Jan.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, let's kind of go through the town meeting articles that are housing related and see if we can make recommendations. And these are not in the order they appear in the warrant, and some of the article numbers have changed. I looked at the draft warrant as it is on tomorrow's select board agenda, and I have that if we need to look at it. But the first one is a pair of articles to impose community impact fees in addition to the short-term rental tax. There are currently articles 47 and 48, and they would impose a community impact fee on professionally managed units and on units, multiple units owned by the same person. When we last saw the draft, it had a 1% community impact fee, and that's what had come out of the select board discussion. We had previously voted to recommend the imposition of a community impact fee without taking a position on the percentage. And I believe that the current town meeting warrant draft is with a 3% community impact fee. So Richard, yeah, okay, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, so this came back before us, partly as a result of the Maurice's coming up because it may be able to fund, part of the debt service, if not all the debt service end of it for interest on a bond. But the other reason was that, looking at the long-term budget outlook, how much of our local receipts, including the short-term rental tax, is being swallowed by the operating budget, and how difficult it might be to sort of wean off of that year over year. So, that was my primary focus, was really to try and get that allocated where I believe it belongs, the short-term rental tax, into housing, at least a large percentage of it. And I just, looking at the long-term budget outlook, don't know how we do that quickly. And so Ryan brought it back up. I had a discussion with Charlie about it. And so then I was convinced to move forward with the 3%, because I think, it's six in the hand.
Yep. So I can, hang on a minute.
Or 3 in the hand, whatever they say.
Yeah. Okay, so here's the article as it currently appears. Here's the first one, and it shows a 3% community impact fee. So do we want to recommend this? And if so, does somebody want to offer a motion? And I suppose we could combine that with the other, the professionally managed community impact fee, which is also on the warrant at 3%. So these are articles 47 and 48, not 46 and 47 like it says in the agenda. They've been renumbered. So somebody want to offer a motion?
Just so everyone remembers and understands that these don't apply to all short-term rentals, just ones that fall within these two categories. It's not 3% on every short-term rental in town.
Right.
And the figure that Ryan has sort of brought up was about $50,000 per 1%. He said he's more comfortable at around 100,000 in revenue at 3% is where he's, pretty confident, according to him. I've never looked at the number, so I really can't vouch for him one way or the other, but just to add context, that's my info.
Okay, so the question is, and I'll offer a motion just to, because really the question is, do we want to recommend Article 47 and Article 48? And so I'll offer a motion to recommend both articles and see whether there's a second and whether there's any further discussion.
Oh, second.
Okay, is there further discussion?
I have a question,
Sure.
and that is when the term professionally managed, can you remind me what that would include, or who it would include?
Hard to know. Let me see if I can find another document for you.
Oh, he's looking for that. Michael, can I ask you a select board question?
Sure, if I
Are
can.
the CPA articles, are you going to handle them collectively under a consent vote or separately?
I don't know. That's kind of up to Ryan, how he puts that on there, but
Or let me say it a different way. Michael, would you suggest at the select board meeting that they do it both for time and expediency?
yeah, I think that probably makes sense.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that's usually how we do it,
That's
right?
it.
The last couple of years, we've done it before we did them individually.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so, yeah. So Jim, to answer your question, the professionally managed unit definition in the statute is what I've got up on the screen.
Right, I'm looking at that, yeah.
And it's really assumes that there's a company that's managing these units. And what constitutes managing is hard to know, whether it includes just handling the booking or whether it includes picking up the trash too. I think just handling the booking is sufficient. So this would get all of the, Airbnb and vacation by owner and all those kind of services. And then there's a second classification, which is owner occupied 2 and 3 unit properties.
Right.
So if somebody owns a duplex and short-term rentals out the other one, that counts. So let's.
So
Or if they have
if the
more than one property.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So if the bookings are handled through a realtor, a local realtor, that would fall under this description?
I think it would. I think Ryan doesn't agree with me. And I went looking for further guidance from the state and really couldn't find any.
But they still have to own 2 or 3, correct? More than one.
No, there are two different fees here. One is somebody that owns 2 or more units,
Okay.
Right.
and one is units that are professionally managed. So if 6 people that each own 1 unit hire, John Doe Incorporated to manage them, then they're professionally managed units, even though there are no multiple units owned by the same person.
So anybody that has a rental property, we're looking to tax again?
It's not clear to me.
I think the professionally managed, I was under the impression that it did not include just the renting out of the unit, just a listing of the units, but that they were actually managed by a management company.
Yeah,
where the
answer is-
profit was like something like Del Mar Properties, where they're actually like property managers, where they pay the rent. This is what I understood. Maybe I'm wrong about this, but they pay the homeowner to lease the property and manage it and then rent it out themselves. That was the impression I got, not just the listing agent for properties.
And who are we charging that to though? Del
the
Mar
user.
or to the owner?
It's the user.
Oh, the user.
Yeah,
Well,
it adds 3% to the tax of the short-term rental tax on top.
On top of the 14% they're already paying?
Yeah. That's why I had a problem with it at first, and it's not evenly applied across all short-term rentals. So there's a
Right.
disadvantage, but in the end, like it's difficult, I think, that's why I wanted it at 1% at first, but I think there's adequate reason to bump it up, but it's a hard tax for me because it's not an equally.
I don't feel like we discussed the professional one when we were talking about the 1% and the 3%. I thought what we were talking about were people that owned more than 2 units.
No, both of them.
To me, that just doesn't really make sense. Where did that come from? That all of a sudden we're going to raise in Wellfleet our tax by another 3%?
Only on those particular properties that are actually, and this is where Harry was sort of thinking that it meant all professionally listed units. Whereas how it was explained to me that it would be professionally managed by like a management company. So
Either way, it just seems a little convoluted. Like if we're going to do it, we should do it for everybody, because who cares whether they hire Del Mar or they hire Kinlan Grover?
That's the problem. We can't.
Yeah, these are two specific statutory proposals. The professionally, I mean, the definition says operated by the same operator. It doesn't really say very much about what the scope of services that's necessary to be considered an operator is. I just don't know. It's been presented to me by others that implies more than just taking bookings, but I couldn't find an answer to that.
It sure seems like if this is confusing us so much, it was going to really be a confusion at town meeting.
It's a
Exactly.
It's kind of a difficult one. It
Mhm.
doesn't apply equally across all properties. You have to, I don't know how even we ascertain who's supposed to be paying it and who's not supposed to be paying it, and how we make sure that we're collecting it. Those are the
Well,
questions that.
Well, that's really the Department of Revenue's problem, but here's the only guidance in the statute. An operator is anyone otherwise operating short-term rent, it doesn't say anything. So I don't know.
Harry,
Yep.
just for some context, Brewster does have this on there. They charge this and the full percentage, according to Charlie.
Okay, well, here comes Ryan.
Hey, all right.
Good.
We'll let Ryan
Explain it to us.
explain this. Good evening, Ryan. Are you in yet? Let's see here. Yeah, Ryan, we were discussing the community impact fee on short-term rentals, Articles 47 and 48. And we seem to have some confusion about what constitutes a professionally managed unit. So if that's something you can speak to, I'd be delighted to recognize you.
Okay, which one would you like me to speak to?
It's the professionally managed unit thing we're having a problem with. We just don't seem to understand what the scope of services is necessary for a unit to be considered professionally managed.
It has to be run by the same operator has to run 2 or more short-term rental units. An operator is typically a owner. Real estate agents do not qualify. However, if an operator holds a lease to multiple properties and uses them as short-term rental, that could be considered taking place by the same operator.
So what's the difference between the community impact fee on the investor owned, which is more than one,
Mm-hmm.
and this, if it's the operator?
So there are 2 different local options. So if it's Article 48, that's on multi-unit properties that may include the operator's primary residence. So if, let's say, owner owns, let's say there's 3 or 4 units on a property, they reside in one of them and they rent the other 3 out on a short-term basis. This would apply to them.
And it doesn't apply, the one before this doesn't apply to them
No.
because it's owned as one person or one multifamily versus owning multiples?
Yeah, so it has to do with
See if I can get these both.
the first one is for primarily single family homes. And yeah.
I think I understand the first one, which
Okay.
is if somebody owns more than one investment property in the town of Wellfleet, they would get this tax. And the owner of the properties would pay it, correct?
Mostly. There is a limit on so that's the multi-unit ones that might include the operator's primary residence are not included in that local option.
Okay, so when we were discussing the 48 one, it sounded like if it was being run by Del Mar or it's on Airbnb, they were included. It sounds like we're basically talking about a small handful of multifamily properties. I guess multifamily properties that somebody would be leasing part of that multifamily out. Is that what this is?
That's what Article 48 is. It says if you own a 2 or 3 unit dwelling and 1 unit is your primary residence and the second and third units are rented short term, they're potentially subject to this tax if this impact fee if the town votes to adopt it.
So why is it called the rental professional?
Well,
Does it have to be called that? Because that's, I think, the part that's confusing.
I think that the titles may be backwards.
1 second.
I've got them both up on the screen from tomorrow night's select board agenda, Ryan.
The same operator, not okay.
Oh. 48.
Just to be clear, the tax is paid by the user on both of these, right?
It's collected. It's collected when it's booked.
So
So
paid by the user.
yep. Well,
It's collected from the owner, but typically it's passed on to the
Pass through.
to the user. Yes.
yeah. So Article 47 is going to be called short-term rental community impact fee on professionally managed units.
Mhm.
And 48 will be short-term rental community impact fees on owner-occupied units,
Okay.
if that helps clear it up.
Yeah, because I think they're either reversed in the current draft.
Right, the description, Jim.
Yeah, 47 has to be adopted before 48 can be adopted.
And 47 is a professionally managed one. Okay, so these are backwards, but are the
Right.
descriptions,
It's titled wrong.
they're titled,
Yeah.
They're titled wrong, but the descriptions are in the correct order.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
okay, so switch the titles, okay.
Okay.
Okay, so
Uh,
I'm like a little confused now. I thought I knew exactly what was going on here.
It sounds like we're dealing with the same small amount of properties, though. It's just how they're owned. Because they're either their own single family individuals or condominiums or whatever, or they're all in one multifamily property. Yes?
Pretty much.
Well, what's the not much? I mean, like, what's the exception?
So the ones of the single family homes, yeah.
Owner, you mean owner occupied?
No,
Oh.
sorry,
Hey.
I wasn't quite ready for this, so.
Apparently we weren't either. I have struggled with this, not from the standpoint of not wanting to impose a community impact fee, but from the standpoint of not really being able to arrive at any real clarity on which types of transactions would be subject to these. The owner-occupied 2 and 3 unit dwellings, I can understand that because, I mean, that's pretty simple. The hard one is, what's a professionally managed unit? And does that mean something like Del Mar where they take out the trash for you? Or does that include Airbnb where all they
It could
do is,
include Del Mar. So Del Mar doesn't just simply take out the trash. They pay the owners a lump sum.
Yeah.
In the over the winter, essentially. to be able to, they effectively hold the lease on a property. And they sublet that out to renters.
Right.
Um,
So they have a very extensive contact with the property, and they control significant aspects of how the property is used and operated. Where I'm starting to struggle with is, what about someplace like Airbnb, for example, which handles bookings and collections and disbursements to the owners, and perhaps imposes some policy requirements on who the owners rent to, but doesn't do anything beyond that. In fact, their websites are quite clear that this is not a lease arrangement between Airbnb and the property owner.
yeah, so that's where Airbnb doesn't hold the lease to the property.
Right.
Del Mar controls the lease to a property, or where it would be collected with Airbnb is if a single operator owns effectively 2 or more. So if there are people that own, multiple houses in Wellfleet that they rent on a short-term basis. So.
Okay, so the people owning them, that makes sense to me. If I just happen to get caught up in the fact that I'm working with Del Mar, you're saying that anybody that leases their house to Del Mar, the tenants that book from Del Mar are going to have to pay this fee because of Del Mar's agreement with their.
Yeah, I think that much is
owners.
very clear.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah.
Yeah.
To me, that is like ridiculous to single out how somebody chooses to rent out their house. I think that is a hotbed to just try to explain it. And 2, that just seems very unfair to me. Why should somebody be penalized if they lease to Del Mar when someone like me rents on VRBO and I don't have to pay it? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I think it's the user that's paying it, but
you're penalizing.
Essentially you're paying more to rent from a company that's managing multiple units than you would be paying for but you pay the same if you have somebody who's got multiple rental units that are on Airbnb, if they own multiple units.
I don't have a problem with someone who has multiple investment properties in our town having their tenants have to pay more, because to me, they're running a business of, short-term rentals, which is what is creating the problem. The fact that we are somehow able to single out one model for people that own one investment property and are renting it through Del Mar versus renting it through Kinlan Grover, to me just seems unfair. And I don't see why we would do that.
It has to be 2 or more, Kathleen, not 1.
Not on that circumstance, but basically the deal is with Del Mar is because they're technically leasing multiple properties all over town, right? Or any company that does this.
But the only company that does it is Del Mar.
Sure.
I mean, to me, that's just, I think that really doesn't play well.
The Massachusetts realtors call it, they don't say professionally managed, they say operated by the same proprietor. Can the owner be the proprietor, but they own more than one, so they're being charged because they have multiple rentals.
Right. The proprietor would also be a management company. If you're a management company that's actually like in charge of you hold the lease to a property, you would be impacted by it. Your property would be impacted by the property you're leasing, right? Like, let's say I just started leasing, paying people for the year to have exclusive rights to sublet their property and manage that whole operation. You're essentially running a business out of each of these people's house. Then I would then anyone I'm renting to would be subject to that 3% impact fee. The owner of the property is not actually managing that rental anymore. They've basically leased it to a management company and they're just collecting a check, like a one-time lease check. I don't know exactly how their model works, but I think
I know how their model works, and to me, that just seems insane. I mean, why should those people be treated any different than any of the rest of us that rent our properties?
but they're gonna pay, so this is the whole problem with both of these taxes, and why I had struggled with it from the beginning is that it doesn't apply across the board. So just because you rent from someone who, like, you're just a user and you rent from someone unknowingly that owns 3 rental properties, you're paying the 3% tax as a user.
But I think it's okay, because that stings the owner, because that slows down their profit, because their rentals are higher. And that's what we're trying to do, discourage people from owning and buying up investment properties and renting them out. So I can connect the dots on that and say, okay, I can see why that would happen. To me, to say the person that rents through Del Mar versus the person that rents through Berkshire Hathaway or Cape Shores pays more is just singling out someone's business model. That seems unfair to me. And I also think the fact that we've had to discuss it this much means that it is way too confusing to take to town meeting without somebody figuring it out and being able to articulate it.
Well, let me make a suggestion. I can withdraw my motion, which I did just to get at something we could discuss. If we don't have a recommendation, we can just say we don't have a recommendation.
Can we recommend the one where someone owns multiple investment properties, that they should be charged, without doing the one where if you rent through Del Mar, you have to pay more?
I think you have to pass one first. The professionally managed one, I think, has to pass before you can.
I
pass
thought they were independent choices.
Maybe Ryan.
That's what I thought, but Ryan said something different earlier.
No, you have to adopt the first one before you can adopt the second.
It's a very complicated statute that I wish they didn't even really make.
Yeah, and whatever we decide to do, short of, in terms of a recommendation, I'm just not looking forward to how I'm going to explain this to 200 people when I can't explain it to 6.
Well,
Yeah.
I still don't completely understand the way the whole thing breaks down. I mean,
the thing is, I don't want, my concerns to torpedo this, because my concerns might be misplaced.
well, I have some concerns.
At the same time, okay, with the, I don't think we even got to a second on this. We could always just not take any action on these two. We likely will meet once more before town meeting, and if we can get a better understanding, we can always make a recommendation at town meeting.
So here's the definition of, oh, I just lost it. Here's the definition of an operator.
Yep.
1 second. Operator. An operator is anyone operating a bed and breakfast establishment, hotel, lodging house, short-term rental, or motel. Operator can be an owner, leasee, subleasee, holder of a mortgage, licensee, or anything else operating a short-term rental.
I described that definition as elastic in the memo I sent the trustees.
Yeah, but if we adopt both of these local options, it would pay for about, I would say around, I'm comfortable saying 20% of the Maurice's purchase. Maybe more.
So it's not just Del Mar, it's
Oh,
anyone
no.
that is short-term renting more than one unit.
Right, but Del Mar, a lot of owners hire someone to lease their property. They might only own one property, but because they're contracting with Del Mar and we're calling Del Mar an operator, all of those people are getting caught up in this.
I don't think so.
Correct?
If they're
Well,
just doing one through Del Mar, they shouldn't be. It's more than one.
No, I think that this statute is aimed at imposing this fee on any situation where some company has aggregated a whole bunch of units, regardless of how many different owners there are, and is managing them.
Yeah. Because they've aggregated the units, like whether they own it or not, they're the ones who are actually running the business. The owner's just getting a lease fee. They're not making the profit on the rental. They're making the profit on leasing it to a management company. That's the difference between that business model and actually having a realtor list a property, and if it rents, you get the money and they get a fee for listing it. Like you're profiting off each rental.
I
So,
think it's splitting hairs and I think it's unfair.
well, I'm not making the argument of whether it's fair or not. That's not what I'm just sort of trying to help define
Right.
because like if you are aggregating, units, you are doing something differently than an owner operator who wants to list their unit, right? So you're soliciting sometimes people to lease you their property so you can have a short-term rental that you can make a profit at. Like you're essentially running multiple businesses. You're not just acting as a listing agent. So it is different. Whether I'm not saying it's fair or not fair.
But I don't think it's different, Mike, because what do you think Kinlan Grover does? They solicit people short-term rentals to be able to list them out to people. I mean, who gets the money? People get less money from Del Mar.
I mean,
Right.
yeah.
People get less money from Del Mar because Del Mar is running the business off their property. Or I mean, I don't mean to just single out one company, but yes, maybe
They're the only company, though, that does that.
But if they were
There's two or
doing
three
something
other ones.
differently, then their tenants wouldn't be subject that fee, right? Because there's a reason why they do it the way that they do it. But I still think that it's different than me as I want to rent my house out and I go to Kinlan Grover and say, hey, I'd like to rent my house out. I'd like to get this much money a week, and then list it. And if it doesn't rent for a week, like I, as the owner, don't get the rental money, right? So if it does rent, I, as the owner of the property, do get the money. And that's just a different arrangement.
Yeah, it's a different business model, but it's the same gamble. I mean, you're taking on Del Mar, it's more of like you put your money into the savings account because you're taking less for your rental and you're getting the money. And if you go to Kinlan Grover, you're rolling the dice a little because you're getting a little bit more money, but if it doesn't rent for the week, you won't get it.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, well, what do we want to do with these?
Well, we had previously voted to recommend the concept, but we had avoided voting on what the percentage should be. So do we want to change our original recommendation to recommend it as it is in the warrant right now with a 3% fee, or do we want to go in a completely different direction and say we're not ready to recommend that at all, for example?
I would say we're not ready to recommend it at all until we get a further clarification.
Shall I just report on these two articles to Charlie when I send him an email tonight that we have not made a recommendation on these two yet? Because it is possible to make a recommendation orally at town meeting.
Can I ask Ryan a question through you? Mr.
Sure.
Chair? Ryan, if you want to answer, with Brewster, so how does the actual, does who determines who gets taxed is the Division of Revenue? Do they
Yep,
go
the state
through
does it.
all the processes of deciding who qualifies and who doesn't qualify as this?
Yes,
And so we don't get involved with that at all as a town. It's just
No.
up to the DOR to collect that money from the people that it determines fit into that category, right?
yes.
And then in the town of Brewster, they have both of these, right?
They're looking at adopting both of them.
Oh, they haven't adopted them.
I don't know. I think it was going to be on this year's town meeting. I'm not sure.
Oh, I thought that when I talked to Charlie, he said that they had adopted them. Or maybe okay, I misunderstood that. All right.
Yeah, they were adopting them to fund wastewater.
Can I just ask, have other towns adopted these and put them in use, and have they had any problems with the definition or collection?
It's all collected by the DOR, so there's really no additional work done by the towns.
Have
Hey,
other
Ken?
towns?
Yeah, we don't make a determination of which units are subject to these community impact fees. That's the DOR is responsible for all of that. They just send us money quarterly based on
Right,
what they,
Harry,
yeah.
my question is, have they had problems with the definition, or do they have experience to say this is fairly straightforward?
It's
Uh,
fairly straightforward. I mean, so there's Plymouth, Falmouth, those are the two closest. Provincetown was headed on their town meeting to adopt the first local option. I'm not sure where the others are, but it's becoming pretty yeah.
I mean, if other towns are doing it and the Department of Revenue is the adjudicates who it applies to,
Yes.
and it hasn't been controversial, it seems like maybe we ought to try it as a source of income.
I mean, I think if a company wants to avoid paying the tax, they can change the model in which they
Yeah, I mean,
operate.
it's a relatively small amount of money for any particular operator, but
Well, it's just their users that pay the fee anyway, but
yes, I understand, right.
It almost sounds like we don't have to understand it as long as the DOR does.
I think we don't, well, let me see if I can say this concisely and quickly. We don't have to deal with the administrative burden associated with determining compliance, enforcing collection, any of that stuff. The
Right.
question that I think we have to be comfortable with is, as a matter of policy, do we want to impose these impact fees on certain units? And do we understand what we're doing if we vote to do that? So put the whole issue of who decides, who handles the back office stuff, because it's not us.
yeah.
Just focus on, as a matter of policy, do we want to impose these two impact fees? And if we do, at what percentage?
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is why I originally really wanted to put a 1% fee on to establish it and see where it went. But I think the need is there financially for the town if we want to put forward housing programs that That's why I
Okay.
succumbed to the 3%.
Does somebody want to offer a motion so we can perhaps progress to the next agenda item?
Right.
Starting to feel like a select board meeting.
Well, that's the,
I mean, if it's helpful, you could also ask Charlie to arrange it so that town council could
Pine on it.
I mean, we can always make the recommendation at the meeting,
yeah.
you know. I think that's better than having some kind of split vote right now. I mean, we could bring it up again.
Okay. It sounds like we're not ready to make a recommendation on these two articles. Is everybody comfortable with not doing that right now?
Sure.
Okay,
Yes.
Yes.
pass. Next one is just before this, and maybe Ryan, as long as you're here, these two stabilization funds. Originally, the discussion in the draft warrant proposed allocating a portion of the short-term rental tax receipts for affordable housing purposes. Apparently, the town has been advised by town council or by somebody that that's not the way to do it. So is this something you can explain for us, Ryan?
Okay, so town council said that they would have to go into or be appropriated by town meeting vote in a special purpose fund. And so there's these two stabilization funds. And that addresses basically the input from town council.
So basically, what these say is 35% of the revenue under the short-term rental tax goes into an affordable housing stabilization fund, subject to further appropriation by your town meeting action.
Yep.
And then there's a mixed income stabilization fund that gets 65% of the short-term rental tax. And that is to
excuse me,
support.
Barry, it's just the community impact fees, not the whole.
Is it?
short-term rental tax.
Yeah, it's just for the community impact fees.
It's a little strange that these come before the articles to impose the fees, but be that as it may, these are housekeeping articles if we pass 46 and 47.
I think the debate will be a whole lot cleaner if you've already decided how you're going to use the monies.
Yep.
No.
So in effect, all of the money from the community impact fees will go into these funds, one of which is for affordable housing, and that's because the statute, the impact fee statute says 35% of the community impact fee has got to go for either affordable housing or infrastructure. And this proposes all of that 35% to go into an affordable housing fund. And then the remainder, 65%, would go in a fund to support housing initiatives within the town of Wellfleet. So in effect, all of the community impact fee would go into one or the other of these funds, and could be appropriated for the fund purposes at a future town meeting.
Yes. So all the community impact fees that would be collected would go to housing in one way or the other.
So can we, I think this one's a little easier. So can we move to recommend this?
Second,
How can we move to recommend this if we're not recommending the other two, the impact fees?
Well, I think because this is, if those impact fees pass, where the money would go. And so obviously, if those pass, as a housing trust, we would want the money to go to housing. So I think
Okay,
it's easier to, I mean, whether we recommend the other one or not, that's sort of a question of fairness, I guess, more than anything. It seems what that's come down to, which is a valid thing to get hung up on. But this isn't about that. This is just a question of, if we collect the money, where should it go?
okay.
So
Was there
Go-
any leeway that it has to go to town meeting? I was really kind of surprised when I read that.
Once it's in a stabilization fund, it has to be appropriated out of that fund.
for the purpose for which the fund was set up.
Right. Yeah, but you
So-
can't do it without an appropriation. If it's a
Right.
stabilization fund.
Right. And that's consistent with, all receipts the town receives.
But can we not move them into the affordable, I guess, I was not privy to most of this information, but I'm surprised that we can't move them straight into the Affordable Housing Trust, but I guess that's what town council said, Ryan.
Yeah, it's on one of those, in the comments of one of the draft warrants.
Okay.
That was in one of our previous select board
Yeah.
meetings.
I'm gonna have to look at that, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of remember. I didn't really know how it wound up like that. Okay, so this is just how it has to be, I guess.
And this ensures an allocation of those fees if they're imposed, ensures an allocation for housing. So the motion is to recommend 45 and 46, the two fees.
I've seconded that.
And Mike has seconded it. So more discussion? Roll call vote. Let's see, Elaine,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Kathleen,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye,
Jim,
he's muted.
Aye.
and the chair votes aye. So that's 7-0. Okay. Next one is even easier, which is Article 36, which is the technical corrections to the Affordable Housing Trust bylaw. We requested those changes go on the warrant, but we never got around to actually recommending it. And that is Article 36. So if you want to see it, I gotta back
I
up a
move
little bit.
Article 36 be
Okay.
recommended to town meeting.
Is there a second?
Second,
That's Sharon.
yeah.
Any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. We'll go same order. Elaine,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Kathleen,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye,
Jim,
Aye, sorry.
and Harry. The chair votes aye also. Okay, now we've got Community Preservation Act appropriations. The first one is 35,000 to this trust for housing purposes.
I would vote to recommend.
Okay. Is there a second?
second.
Discussion? Okay, Elaine,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Kathleen,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye,
Jim,
Aye.
chair votes aye, 7 in favor and none opposed. $185,000 for another buy down, Article 29. I'll move that. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, I didn't catch who that was.
Sharon was one of them,
Okay.
Right.
or
Sharon.
two.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, roll call vote. Elaine,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Kathleen,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
chair votes aye, 7 in favor, none opposed. Okay, let's see, what's on the next page? Okay, there's $7,500 for the Lower Cape Housing Institute.
Move to support.
Okay, that's Sharon. I'll second it. Discussion? Okay, roll call vote, Elaine,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Kathleen,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
chair votes aye, 7 in favor, none opposed. Next one is a late addition, is $20,000 for the Lily House, Article 30. The reason I did not put this on initially, I'm gonna stop sharing, is because it didn't strike me as directly related to affordable housing.
Right.
It's not that I think it's a bad thing or anything, but I just, that's why I didn't put it on, but Gary asked that it be put on the agenda, so here it is.
The only reason we can, the only umbrella that we can give Lily House any CPA funds is as a housing rehab. So we gave it to them to redo the bathrooms for the folks there.
So would you like to recommend this article?
Sure, I'll recommend it.
Okay, Gary, is there a second?
Second.
Elaine? Okay, let's see, where'd my piece of paper go? Elaine,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Kathleen,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
chair votes aye, 7 in favor, none opposed. That, I believe, is the end of the town meeting recommendations, and I will send Charlie and Ryan an email summarizing that tonight once we finish this meeting. Next item is the housing study grant. Is there anything we need to do on that, Elaine?
No, we're waiting for Becky to come back to send out the scope of work to consultants.
So no action.
No action.
On 90 Freeman, I think the only question I had was, or the only question that Katie Klein had was a question that I forwarded to Elaine, and because I didn't know the answer to it. And I don't know whether you've closed the loop on that.
I think I did. That was quite a while ago.
Yeah, it was before Becky went on vacation. Now
Yeah.
Becky's was gone.
I had responded.
Yeah, okay. So I think we're finally at a point where I can go back to Katie Klein and say, okay, the draft is fine, and go back to Becky and say, put in the dates you need to meet all your procurement requirements, and let's issue this. So I think those are the next steps. And Becky is back this week or next week?
Monday, next Monday, I think.
She's back
Yeah.
next month. Okay. So I think that's ready to go now. We just have to get Becky to tell us what kind of timing she needs on the request for proposals, and we can actually issue it.
Right.
Woohoo.
So.
Yeah.
Let's see. The CDP did provide a proposal to, let's see, monitor eligibility for financial support for creation of accessory dwellings. Let me, let's see. see if I can find the document, but in the meantime, Gary, I think you'd had the conversation with the CDP about this.
So I made the request
Yeah,
for them to give us a proposal. I think they responded to the old AADU bylaw,
yes.
and it needed to be revised. And I don't think has it been revised?
I haven't seen a revised one. I did notice that they had documenting affordability in there, and it didn't, we don't really need to do that. Okay, here it is. No, all right.
Can I make a suggestion? Given the
Yes.
of the hour.
Yep.
Elaine, do we have a CDP meeting this week?
Yes.
Why don't I get clarity on this, Harry, and bring
Yeah.
it back to a future meeting?
Yes.
There was a revised proposal on April 26th.
Oh, there was. Okay.
Yes.
Oh,
Mhm.
does anybody have that?
I do
I
not.
just looked it up from Ann Robinson. Yes.
Okay.
And we can discuss it Wednesday at our check-in with CDP.
Okay.
I can.
Let's do that. That coincides with a dentist appointment I have, unfortunately. I don't know. I think I'd prefer the CDP, but
Mhm. Do you want me to forward this to everybody?
sure.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay. Next is a letter of appreciation to Barbara Woodbury for the wonderful job she did on the revised housing website. And Elaine had sent around a draft, which I thought was terrific.
Yeah, I think it's time to get something official in the mail to her. to
Yeah,
thank her.
I agree.
Sounded great.
Do
Okay.
we need a movement, a motion?
Yeah, let's do that.
I move to accept the letter that Elaine wrote to Barbara Woodbury.
Second. Any discussion?
Harry and Gary, are you able to docu-sign those, or should I just sign everybody's name?
You can sign my name.
Delegated to Elaine.
Yeah, I have a signature stamp left over from when I was town administrator.
Okay.
Okay. That's the only thing I left with. Okay, let's do a roll call vote on this. Elaine,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Kathleen,
Hi.
Gary,
Aye.
Michael,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
chair votes aye. And let's see, we have minutes
Thank you, Elaine.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yes. We have minutes to do for
The 25th.
April 20th, April 4th, April 20th, and the morning meeting of April 29th. And I sent those all around. And I collected corrections. There weren't many, but I'll show them to you if you want to see them. Let's see, we'll start with April 4th. There weren't any changes to the April 4th minutes, so they were the way I sent them to you. Yep.
I would move
Great.
that-
Do you want us to vote them one at a time, Harry?
No, let's just take a look at then the next one was April 20th. And I did make a correction to this one, a couple of corrections, so let me show it to you. Share, okay, so This is April 20th, yeah. Further up. Yeah, there's a correction here in the first paragraph where it says the opportunity expires, and I left the N off. And there's a correction in the second paragraph right here where it said in instead of on. And there's another one here, another typo, so haven't changed any important words. And that's all for that one. And then the last one is the real short one for
29th.
29th in the morning.
Mhm.
And this one, I did make a change because I added the time of the meeting
Right.
up there. And that was the only change I made to it. So that's, other than that, it's the same way I sent it to you. So
Great.
if
Good with
we're,
these, Harry. Can
if
we
we're
just
ready,
take the second one out when we make the motion? Because I don't like to vote on minutes where I wasn't at the meeting.
okay. So you want to do the meeting of April 4th and April 29th in the morning?
Sure.
Mhm.
Okay, so somebody move that.
So moved.
Second? I'll second it.
Second.
Okay, so we'll do roll call vote. Elaine,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Kathleen,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
chair votes aye. That's 7 in favor, none opposed. Minutes of April 20th, that was the one that Mike and Jim were both absent on.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I didn't
Yeah.
wasn't there at that one either.
Yeah, okay.
I had
So-
candidates night.
That's right. Congratulations on getting reelected, Mike.
I'm
Yes.
just glad to be able to keep serving on this board.
Okay. So a motion to approve the minutes of April 20th. Is there a
So
second?
moved.
Okay, Sharon moved it, so I'll second it. Roll call vote, Elaine,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Kathleen,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Mike,
Abstain.
and Jim.
Abstain.
And the chair votes aye. That's 5 in favor, none opposed, 2 abstentions. We had a posted meeting for the afternoon of April 29th. I am not sure what I need to do for minutes for that, so I'm gonna not, and it wasn't on this agenda. So the only thing we have left is future agenda items and a date for the next meeting. And I would suggest, I can get my calendar to come up. Here we go. I would suggest, well, we could do Monday, June 6th, if that's all right with everybody.
I'll be away, Harry, but
Okay.
no, go
Or-
ahead. I mean,
Okay. Or June 13th, that's the other choice.
I'll be away then.
Okay, so
Well-
let's,
And the 6th is before town meeting, right? So.
Yes,
wouldn't
it
that be
is.
good to do once
So
more
that-
before-
that would be good.
Mhm.
So we'll do the 6th, I'll have the agenda items from this meeting. And anything else that pops up, just send me an email.
Thank you.
And-
And we're going to revisit Articles 46 and 47 at that meeting?
Yeah, we're gonna try to
Okay,
get some closure on that.
okay. Thank you.
Harry,
Yes,
could we set the date for the meeting after that?
sure.
And maybe not go a month? I would like to invite Stuart Saginaw to present.
Stuart.
Okay. I can do really basically almost any Monday.
20th,
Yeah, I can do the 20th.
but then we'll have the wrap up of whatever happened at town meeting as well.
Yeah,
June 20th?
20th. June 20th, though. June, not.
Wow.
We're meeting twice in June, having town meeting and doing the Maurice's work groups. Boy, you guys are really trying to burn us out.
Okay, we don't have to. It's just a suggestion.
What
Hey,
was it
I have-
for? I'm lost.
Well,
I stopped paying attention for a second.
I think we wanted to give Stuart Sagnor an opportunity to talk to us about bonding for Maurice's.
Maybe we can just wait on that
Okay,
because the fall town meeting will be,
Yeah,
it's not till September. I don't know. I might have a little
Hmm.
burnout by town meeting.
okay.
Well, okay, maybe just for calendaring purposes, how about Monday, July 11th?
So I have written in my notes, Harry, that
Yeah.
our housing trust terms end on June 30th.
That's correct. So the administrative staff should be polling us on whether we would like to be reappointed. And presumably the select board will do that at a June meeting if we would like to be reappointed and they would like to reappoint us. But I'd still schedule a meeting on the assumption that the
The 11th
majority
is
of us,
fine.
the majority of us will be around.
The 11th is okay.
Okay, so let's do that. And anything else? I apologize for almost a 2-hour meeting, but some stuff we had to do.
If
So
we,
June 11th at 7. I mean, July 11th, sorry.
Yeah,
Mhm.
July
Yeah.
11th.
can I just ask a question?
yes,
We're
please.
talking about scheduling.
Yep.
So if, as I brought up before, if we decided in our larger Maurice's group that postcards would be a good idea,
Mhm.
do I need to have another meeting with the trust to get that approved, that expenditure?
We could do that on June 6th.
Okay,
Mhm.
yeah, all right, that's fine.
Okay,
That's good, because I definitely don't want to wait till July to get
Yeah.
start,
right.
Harry, just can you happen to have the motion up, but
Yep.
didn't we approve that you could authorize the money? So I
The
don't,
treasurer with the approval of the chair or vice chair.
so,
So that would give you the authority, Gary, if you could convince either Elaine or I that it was a good idea.
I was gonna say, I don't think we have to wait for a meeting to answer your question, Sharon. If you think it's a good idea, come
Okay.
to us with the how much and what.
Perfect,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Sharon, a question on that. Do you have any idea about whether or not we're going to be able to do a meeting, a community meeting?
You mean like a forum?
Forum, right, community forum.
Yeah. So Gary and then Ryan, I think, both spoke to John Morrissey, but then I called John and said, sort of, I'm in this communications group, so why don't you just work with me and keep it less confusing than trying to work with everybody.
Okay.
And he and I had a conversation. He was going to take it to his board. They hadn't set a date, but he didn't see any reason why it would be a
Okay.
problem. It'd probably be mid to late August.
That would be great.
Yep.
Jim, can we ask you about the $2.7 million grant?
I'm sorry, 2.7.
The one that just was issued for 95 Lawrence?
That I think had to do with the septic,
With
Wastewater treatment.
wastewater, right, wastewater.
Yep.
I don't know a great deal about that.
Oh.
Other than that it was, came through. And I just learned about this last week, but I didn't get the details on it.
Okay,
So I have to get back to Kurt on that, find out how that's going, what's going to happen with that.
We all set? Somebody like to move to adjourn?
So
So
moved.
moved.
Okay,
And I'll second that.
okay. Okay, Elaine,
Aye.
Sharon,
Aye.
Kathleen,
Aye.
Gary,
Aye.
Mike,
Aye.
Jim,
Aye.
chair votes aye. I misplaced my little piece of paper. Okay, we stand adjourned at 8:52.
All right, I'm gonna go watch the Celtics game.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Harry.
Yeah, good night all.
All right,
Good night.
take care.